In this video we're going to be looking at how we can improve our header on our website using Elementor. As you can see, we currently have a plain header with a heading, text and a button. We want this to be much more eye-catching, so we're going to start off first with a background. To change it, come up to the 6 dots at the top where it says Edit Container. From here, head over to the Style option. From the Style option, you can then choose whether you want a classic colour or image, a gradient, a video, or in this case we're going to be using a slideshow with multiple images. Here you can go down and select your images for the slideshow. I've uploaded the 3 different images that I want to use. Then come down and click on Create a New Gallery. Once you're happy, go to Insert Gallery. As you can see, this is now going to slide through the different images that we have. You can keep this on an infinite loop so it can keep going through all the images. There's a few things that you can do here to make it even better. First of all, you can change the transition way. We've got this on fade, but you can also change it to slide a different direction. So as you can see, it's now going to slide rather than fade. I quite like the fade option, so I'm going to leave it on fade. Another option is Ken Burns effect, where it zooms in on the image slightly. You can actually change the direction, whether it's going to zoom in or whether it's going to zoom out of the image. I think I prefer the image where it zooms in. Another thing is the image overlay. Some of the images are too bright, so I might want to overlay this with a different colour. By choosing background overlay, we're going to come down to the background type, and I'm going to choose the colour black in this case. As you can see, it's already got darker, and we can change this by changing the opacity. If I do this full, it's simply going to look black. However, if I take it off, it's just going to have a black overlay. And this is going to make my wording a lot easier to read once I change the colour. Now time to change the height of the background because everything is quite squished in. Again, with the 6 dots selected on here, we're going to come over to Layout and we're going to come down to Minimum Height. I'm going to drag this now to my desired height. The content inside doesn't quite match because we need this to be central. Still, having the 6 dots selected and on Layout, we're going to come down to Justify Content and we're going to change the alignment to the middle option, here where it says Center. Now everything that you add is going to be centered first. So let's take a look how this is looking so far, and it looks pretty good. Now time to change the heading, the text and the buttons. The heading usually comes in this blue colour, so change this accordingly. I'm going to change this over to white, because we have a slightly darker background. Then I'm going to head over to typography. Here I'm going to choose my desired font. And then you can choose your desired size. I want quite big text, but of course double check this for mobile to make sure that it reads well and it doesn't cut off the letters. You can also adjust your line height and your line spacing. So I want my top and bottom ones to be quite close together, like so. Another way of making your lettering stand out is by clicking on the text shadow, because it creates a shadow around your text. Change the blur amount, this will make it to the maximum blur, and this will make it as small a blur as possible. Now down to the text section. The colour isn't great because it blends into the background, so we want to go change this by coming over to the Style option. Here we can go ahead and change the text colour. I'm going to change this to white as well. Next to typography. Here we're going to change the font and the weight of the text. I quite like this font, however I want it to be a little bit more bold, so I'm going to come down to the weight section. Let's change this to 600 semi-bold. You can also change the size accordingly, and the line height or letter spacing. In this case you can even change the word spacing, which is quite handy because the word spacing is quite large on this text. Again, for this instance I'm going to go for a text shadow. This is only because we've got a dark background. Now to the button, which looks very generic at the moment. It's the green colour when you first add your button. There's a few pre-made button styles, however we want to make this a bit more custom, so we're going to come over to Style. From here we can change the position of the button. I'm going to keep it on the left. The typography of the button, we're going to choose a different font here. And you can also choose the size of the font. If you enlarge it, it will then start to enlarge the button. We can add a text shadow, so it has a shadow around the wording, and then the colour of the text or the background. Here I think we're going to go for a light blue option. This looks good, but there's no animation and nothing happens to the button, which makes it look a little bit boring. First I'm going to come down to the border type. I'm not going to add a border to it, but I am going to add a border radius, so this is going to make it a bit more rounded around the corners. As you can see a bit better if I click off of it. Here you can also add a box shadow. I'm going to add an opposite colour, so I'm not going to add a dark colour here, I'm going to add quite a light colour. That's because my background's darker, so it almost makes it look like it's shining from the background. One thing that I'd like to do here is make an animation if I hover over the button. To come do that, we're going to go from Style, across from Normal to Hover. To easily change the animation, you can come over to Hover Animation, and I'm just going to change mine over to Grow. So now if I hover over it, the button's going to grow. However, we can do other things when you hover over it. We can change the text colour slightly, so when you hover over it, it's going to change the text colour. And even the background type, even when you hover over it. I'm going to change the colour so it's a slightly darker blue. As you can see, now when we hover over it, we have a darker blue with a slightly darker inside white. Now this is starting to look much better. One thing that we can do to just finish this off is come over to actually edit the container and the margins. This might look good on a desktop, but on mobile, the wording might come a little bit too far left and right. I go right up until the corners. So by clicking on Edit Container on the top left, we're going to come to Advanced, then we're going to come to Padding. And select this again until not all the links values are together. So I'm going to change the right side to 20 and the left side to 10. So now we have a spacing of 10 on the left and 20 on the right. We might also want to do the top and bottom, so I'm going to put a spacing of 15 on the top and 15 on the bottom. Now as you can see, there's a bit of spacing on the button. So on the mobile view, it won't now go straight from this to whatever the section is next, straight underneath it, and it will have some spacing. And just like that, we've improved our header in a matter of minutes.